क्या हो गया? हेलो
Sir?
हेलो.
Sir? Yes,
Okay,
sir.
let me go to the screen again. So is my screen visible?
Yes, sir. Screen is visible
Yes.
in presentation mode.
So good evening, everybody. Welcome back to the session. So what we have seen so far is overview of Six Sigma, and then we also looked at what are the exact deliverables of the define phase. So today we'll move to the major phase. So as I said earlier also, we will be answering 3 questions at each step or each phase. So the 4, 5, and 6 steps are part of an major phase. So what is written in the block is again an typical Six Sigma language, while what is written out of a box is a layman's language. So the step 4 is define performance standard. So what is the best way to measure? So we are talking about the CTQ. So we are really concerned about what is the best way to measure, and we will write down the equation of how we are measuring it. So we'll understand that as we proceed in that. So establish, if the measurement system is not there, then establish a data collection plan and do a measurement system analysis. Now we'll also look at why measurement system analysis is required and what are the limits for a measurement system analysis variation. And if it is within a limit, then only the concept in Six Sigma is that if the measurement system analysis variation is within limit, then only we go for an next analyze phase of the project. Otherwise, we'll have to set right the measurement system first and then go for an further analysis. And third step is establish the process capability, how good I am today. So everything, when you talk about an improvement, you will come as you join an industry, everybody will talk about an improvement, continuous improvement, etc. But the improvement is nothing but the improving the capability of the process. So thrust here is again the capability of the process. So what we do generally in a major phase is to try to find out what is the capability of the existing process before we improve anything. So and the objective is again whether the capability or indirectly a Six Sigma level or Sigma level has improved or not. So that is what the thrust of an Six Sigma methodology, to establish what is an capability before you start for an project. So one of the important point here of measuring a capability, that you can measure a capability for each and every process, each and every business. So that is one of the important part, that you can bring all processes together on 0 to 6 scale. So you can judge the scale, all processes, all business on 0 to 6 scale. That is what is one of the important contribution of Jack Welch when he was looking after GE. So what he did, he was not a statistician, but he calculated the capability of each every process at business. So what he did, he brought all his businesses on 0 to 6 scale. So this capability calculation is depending upon what the customer needs or what is the customer want is. So we'll look at that simple arithmetic to calculate the capability as a major phase end. And if time permits, we will also look at the 7 QC tools of an analyze phase today. So let us start with an fourth step. So what are the deliverables of the major phase? Is develop data collection plan, validate measurement system, and determine process capability, in short, Sigma level of a baseline. So what is the best way to measure? So the picture in front of you is self-explanatory. What is the best way to measure? So we'll have to finalize what is the best way to measure this. So why it is important? So when you go and actually, suppose you are taking a project on improving the yield. So at the start of the project, we write down how you are calculating the yield. So if you suppose you are talking about the yield, there are various ways you can calculate yield. So one of the common method is what is input versus what is output. And the another method is what is production divided by production plus waste. So I'm not again saying here which method is right or which method is wrong. But when you have selected a CTQ as an yield, we are emphasizing here that which formula you have used, you write down that formula so that you don't change the formula and improve your CTQ. So that is what is the fundamental. You define your performance standard. So write down exactly how you are calculating your CTQ. So you must be wondering why I am stressing this point. But actually, what I experienced in industry, many people calculate the output in a different ways. Or even the manipulative approach, which is not encouraged in Six Sigma. If you change the yield formula, you can improve the yield. So what you are writing down here is when you are going for a project, you are simply writing down how you are calculating yield, cycle time, etc., etc. That is what is the formula, how you are going to calculate it. So the next part is my data discrete or continuous? So there are two types of data, discrete and continuous. We'll look at that. And is the data collected from a system or manually? So generally nowadays, most of the data collection is done by a system. So the major phase is only for an academic importance in Six Sigma methodology. But if suppose the data is not collected from a system, then if it is manually collected, then it is very important to verify measurement system analysis. Another aspect of measurement system analysis is if a subjective thinking or subjective yes or no is going into the system, means there are inspectors and inspector are inspecting the part, and by physical inspection they are saying okay or not okay, then also the measurement system analysis is most important. So that is why the question is whether the data collected by a system or manually. Is the inspection done manually or by some robot or etc.? So if it is manually, then this phase is most important for them, or most important part of the project. Otherwise, if you have to only phase the data from a system, then the major phase is only of an academic interest. And what is the defect definition? So when we calculate the capability of the baseline today, how good I am today, the important is what is the defect definition. So what I am going to call as a defect. So this is what we will look at today in a major phase. So why measurement system analysis? Basically, what we look at the variation is a total variation and observed variation. Now this observed variation and what is our interest is what is an actual variation in the process. So it may happen you have an observed variation and the actual variation, process variation, is a part of an total observed variation. So if you look at this slide, it will be more clear to you. So out of a total variation, you have two parts. One is an actual process variation, while other is a measurement system variation. Now, actual process variation is your concern and you are going to improve it as a part of a process or a Six Sigma methodology. So then there are two parts to an actual variation, whether it is a short-term variation and long-term variation. We'll come to that in an knowledge phase. But now, since we are in the major phase, what is our concern is how much is the measurement system variation. And if that measurement system variation is within limit, then it becomes logical to go for an actual process, reducing actual process variation. Now, if you look at if the measurement system variation is beyond limit, it may happen that you will work on reducing the actual process variation, but it won't reflect in your project because there is a measurement system variation as a main part of a total variation. So we have to set right that measurement system within norms. And if it is not within norm, then only we go for a project. That is what is important part of an Six Sigma project. So measurement system variation can be because of accuracy and precision. So you are all engineers, so you understand all these things. What is accuracy, what is precision, and the accuracy is depending upon bias, stability, and linearity. So many of the times in the industry, those who are not from an engineering background has a challenge in understanding this accuracy and precision. So when I talk about the accuracy, there are three components for an accuracy. One is bias, stability. Bias is bias. There is a measurement system error, and there is an error of some, but that error has to be constant throughout when you check all the time. That is what is I mean as in bias. The stability means the measurement system. If suppose you are taking weight, so it has to be stable throughout the period when you are recalibrate till you recalibrate that. So that is what is the meaning of instability, and it is very important to establish what is your calibration schedule. Are we doing a calibration on time, etc., etc.? That all variation comes in stability. While there is a linearity, means the linear for the entire scale. If suppose my maximum my weighing scale has a capacity of 1 ton, that is 1000 kg. So whatever bias I have, if at all, the bias is mostly not acceptable, but if at all I have some bias, that bias has to be constant throughout my measurement system. मतलब that bias has to be 10 kg for 100 kilos also, or 900 kilo की भी 10 kg होना चाहिए. So that is for my entire scale, minimum to maximum. That is what is mean by linearity. So let us understand also what is accuracy and precision in detail. Okay. So accuracy means you are doing something always on the target. So if I have to explain you using an cricket fielder's example. So suppose there is one fielder who is Saurabh Ganguly, who is at long leg, and he has to throw a ball at the batsman end. Now, if you look generally, Saurabh Ganguly, when he throws here and there. And if you look at, take an example again, the Saurabh Ganguly, suppose I take example of an John D. Rhodes. So how does the John D. Rhodes throws every time? He throws every time ball on stumps every time. So what is accuracy is whether I am on target or not. That is what is mean by accuracy. And what is precision means I am not accurate, but I am precise, means I am throwing a ball at the corner, but consistently in that corner. That is what is the precision. So precision means it may happen that I am making some slight error, but consistently I am making that error. I am consistent with my observations every time. That is what is my precision. So if you look at, as I explained you, accuracy has got three components: bias, stability, and linearity. Precision has got two components, what is called as in repeatability and reproducibility. It is very important to understand, because generally this can be set right with the help of an instrument, but this is what is required. A human with an means human error reflects in this repeatability or reproducibility. That is what is precision is. So what is repeatability? So repeatability, if suppose you have been doing a titration, simple acid versus base. So when you do a titration, generally you get a reading of 9.2, something like that. So what you do generally, if you get a 9.2 reading, what you try to do, you try to ask the other fellow that how much is your reading. Okay, so he says 10.2. So what is the meaning of that? Your reading is not matching with his reading, so you are not reproducible. And suppose you got that doubt that his reading may be right, I am wrong, then what you do? You do it again. And if you do it again and have a same reading like 9.2, then you are repeatable. So what is basically analysis done by a person on 2 consecutive days. Suppose आज वो करता है, what is his reading? 9.2. And if suppose unknowingly tomorrow also he is repeating the same experiment, what is his reading is? And if they are matching, then he is repeatable. I can give you a common examples. You give a blood sample. Nowadays, it is very common in a COVID scenario also. Some laboratory declares COVID positive, other laboratory declares same sample as an COVID negative. So what are they? They are not reproducible. So the repeatability is the same sample is repeated again by a same person. He should give a same result. There will be always a variation. The variation is always a part of a process. So there will be always a variation, but is that variation within limit? That is what we want to see. And if that variation is in limit, we say is repeatable. If the same sample is checked by a different person, because there will be 4-5 analysts in the laboratory. Like I gave you an example of a blood sample. So blood sample probably checked by, if you send to a pathological laboratory, there are 3-4 persons who are checking the blood, means sugar in the blood. So if it is checked by any of them, they should give a same result. That is what is called as an reproducibility. And if that reproducibility is not there, then there will be a measurement system variation. And then if that is beyond limit, here we say 90%, more than, if it is more than 90%, then you have to set right that and then only go for an actual improvement in the process. That is what is the concept. Now, apart from accuracy, precision, there are 3 and 2 components of accuracy and precision. One more important thing is what is the resolution of the measurement system. So if you look at this photograph, it is a photo finish of an 100-meter race. So 100-meter race is always so close. If you recall, in 1984 Olympics, PT Usha was declared 4th from India, only by 100 second. Okay, so why she was declared 4th? Because the measurement process or the measurement clock was having resolution to count that 100 seconds. So it is important that is the resolution of my measurement system good enough to detect between 2 parts. So what was the resolution was good, so they were able to detect 3rd and 4th. That is why she was declared 4th, and the other her opponent was declared 3rd, and we that time missed an bronze medal, which was of very important during that period, because we are not getting medals like what we have seen in last 2-3 Olympics, like that. So that is based on these norms, we set up the criteria for passing for a measurement system. So if it is an attribute data, your repeatability has to be more than 90%, your reproducibility has to be more than 90%, and then accuracy also has to be more than 90%. And if it is a continuous data, then the overall total variation, it is called R&R, means repeatability plus reproducibility, should be less than 10%. If it is less than 10%, then it is called as a green signal. If it is 10 to 30%, then it is an orange signal. Then you have to take a call. Sometimes in orange signal we go, or sometimes we stop. So you have to take a call with the champion. Why? Because it may happen that to improve the measurement system capability may be a costly affair. You may have to introduce good balances or some instrumentation which is costly, and then your champion has to take a call whether to go for that costly measurement system or not. And if it is not business economics is not allowing him to do so, then he may give a call that yes, let it be there, you go ahead in the project. But if your measurement system variation is more than 30, you have to set right your measurement system and then only go for a project. So basically, when during measure phase, if you understand that my measurement system is having a variation of more than 30, that means my measurement is not capable and I have to do something or change my measurement system. That is the message to a top management or whoever is taking up the project. So that is how the norms are for a measurement system analysis, and it is also about the distinct categories. So number of distinct categories, it is indirectly the resolution of the process should be more than 4. So here is an example to explain you what is repeatability and reproducibility again. So it is about an pass-fail sample. Means some parts are produced, and after the parts are produced, which we call it as a finished good, the finished good is examined by an inspector, and there are several inspectors to inspect that. It is done 100%. I have taken few operators as an example. So there are operator 1, operator 2, and operator 3 who are part of this analysis or part of this exercise, and they will examine 14 parts. So I have configured a sample of 14 parts. When I have configured a sample of 14 parts, how it generally is to be configured, when I am talking about the 14 parts, 7 has to be good, 7 has to be bad. So 50% good, 50% bad. And even in that 50%, it has to be 50-50, clear-cut bad and marginal bad, or marginal fail, or clear-cut good or marginal pass. Because we have to understand whether my inspectors are doing a good job or not. And when there is a subjective thinking, a subjective inspection being done in an industry, it is always a matter of concern to have a good measurement system analysis, to have a faith in our inspectors. Generally, this exercise is conducted so that we establish that my inspectors are doing good job. But let us look at this example. So the operator 1, now I have 14 parts, and my operator 1 inspecting it for the first time. That is what I call as a try 1, and he notes down the reading. And again, after 2-3 days, maybe I reshuffle the sample. I have to take a care that he doesn't know the answer, what he has written during the first try. And then he again looks at try 2 and he notes down the answer. Similarly, operator 2 does it twice, 2 times, try 1, try 1. Operator 3 also does try 1 and try 2. Now, it is very important to understand the concept of an repeatability and reproducibility here. Now, all the samples, when operator 1, try 1 and try 2, they are all matching. That means they are 100% matching. So I say operator 1 is repeatable. And similarly, if you look at operator 3, he is also repeatable. Now, if you look at the performance of the operator 2, he is not repeatable. 80% only times he is right. So he has already made changes for 20% times of the products. So either he has called sometime pass, fail, ulta sulta, like that. But he is not consistent, means he is not repeatable. That is what I want to establish here. Now, the second concept is about the reproducibility. So ideally, so what is the observation of operator 1 should match with operator 2 and should match with operator 3. That is what I say 6-way match. And if it is 6-way is not matching, then I said no. And the overall percentage matching is only 57%. And there is a last column that is about reproducibility and accuracy. So one concept, if their try 1, try 2 is matching, they are repeatable. If 1, 2, 3 are matching, they are reproducible also. And if all the 7 columns are matching, I say it is accurate also. So if you look at that agreement percentage for all 7 columns, it is hardly 42%. So now this is actually a live project. I have had my data, live data. I have quoted this live data for you. So if suppose now my project was on quality, so I am trying to improve a quality. Now, if I go and look at the measurement system, if the performance of my inspector is such a miserable, even if I improve the process, is my actual variation is going to reduce? May not be, because there is no consistency among the operators and it is not matching with the accuracy. So it is only matching, 42% is matching with the accuracy, and only reproducibility is 57%. So it becomes mandatory for me to set right the measurement system first and then go for an actual improvement in the quality so that it will reflect in real quality. That is what is an emphasis of a measurement system analysis. So you understood the attribute data analysis on this? So it is very important part to check up the measurement system. If you have any doubts, you can ask me. Otherwise, we will move to capability. Okay, so we'll move to capability. So what is capability? So we always refer this term capability. ये boss capable है, ये sir capable है, ये ऐसा है. So ये state का CM capable है, ये PM capable है, etc. We always use this word capability. So when we generally use this or do these statements, what we subconsciously we do some calculations in our mind. And what we actually try to match is what is expected performance by a CM or by a PM versus what is his actual performances. That is how we decide a capability. So what is expected when we voted for him, what is expected out of him, and against that what he is performing, that we compare and say he is capable or not capable. Now when we are talking about a Six Sigma, we are converting the same concept of an expected performance and actual performance into numbers. So when we say about the customers numbers, when we are calculating about our processes, so expected performance is nothing but a customer voice, what exactly customer wants, and actual performance is a variation in the process. So if we divide what is required by a customer by a variation in the process, we get an index which is called as an the sigma level of the process, or we also call it as a CP or a CPK of the process. So let us look at an example. Just an example, hypothetical example. Joginder Arora comes to Mumbai for a training of 3 weeks. Now, when he comes to Mumbai for 3 weeks, he has got two aunties who are staying in Mumbai. One auntie stays in Bandra, which is one of the suburban of Mumbai. And what he does, he stays at Bandrawala auntie and go to a station. And every day he used to take out a ticket, which is for a suburban. That time when I have configured this presentation, it was not so digitized. So try to match with that concept. So he used to stand in a queue and he has noted down the time, how much time he got a ticket. So for the day 1, 14 minutes, 12 minutes, 2 minutes, 24 minutes, and day 5, 8 minutes, and overall average is 12 minutes. Now during the next week, that is week 2, the another auntie who stays at Mulund, and he does the same exercise. He every day goes in the morning, stand in the queue and note down the timing, how much time was required to get the ticket, and he notes down that timing, and average time is suppose 14 minutes. Now based on this, if he wants to take a decision where he should stay for the 3rd week, so he has to calculate what is the capability, which is more capable process, so that he can rely on that process and stay there. So if you look at the Bandra, how can he calculate the capability of the process? The important is to quantify the variation in the process. So how can we quantify the variation in the process? The concept is standard deviation in the process. So hope you all engineers and you know what is the standard deviation. And if he calculate the standard deviation at Bandra, which is 8.12, and he also calculate the standard deviation at Mulund, which is 1.48. Now this is what we call as a process wise. So variation in the process. Now if you look at that, if you look at this, Bandra has got a lesser average. Still, the Mulund process is more capable. So why? Because if you simply look at that, the spread at Bandra is too much. means he sometimes get a ticket in 2 minutes also, and sometimes he has to wait for a 24 minutes also. But if you look at the Mulund, he is moreover consistent. So the capability of the process depends on the consistency of the process, or consistency of the output of from the process, or lesser variation in the process. So how to calculate that capability? This is how it looks like. Bandra, there is a lot of speed. It is from 2 to 24. While if you look at the Mulund, it is 12 to 16. So probably if you look at the distribution, it will look, the Bandra distribution will look like this, and Mulund distribution will like thinner and slightly taller like this. So if at all I want to go and calculate the capability, how will I calculate the capability? The indices which is called as an CP. So there is a simple arithmetic here. So what is the formula is USL minus LSL divided by 6 into standard deviation. So what is USL is LSL is upper specification limit and lower specification limit. And this upper specification and lower specification limit is always set by a customer. And if you multiply by 3 to this CP, you get what is in sigma level is. So let us go and calculate the capability at both the stations, where Bandra and Mulund. So if you go and calculate, let us assume when Joginder Arora goes to a station, he assumes that I should get ticket between 10 to 16 seconds, 16 minutes. So what is my upper limit is 16, my lower limit is 10. So it is simple arithmetic, 16 minus 10 divided by 6 into 8.12. Why 8.12? Because the variation at Bandra, or standard deviation of Bandra at Bandra, is 8.12. So my process capability is 0.12. Now same if you calculate that at Mulund, it is USL minus LSL, and here I have used the standard deviation as 1.48. My capability becomes 3 times. So it is 4.45. So when you talk about Google anywhere about Six Sigma, generally what they say, it is about reducing the variation in the process. So indirectly it is improving the capability of the process. So if you want to improve the capability, there are 2 options that you have in your hand. One is widening the limits. Suppose I extend these limits from 16 to 18 and 10 to 8. So I have widened my limits. I will get an improvement in the capability. So if you look at the same example, the capability which was 0.12 at Bandra now has become 0.20. So it has improved. But unfortunately, what happens? This USL and LSL is not decided by a producer. So it is always important that USL and LSL is decided by a customer. So you don't have a control as a producer on this. So it will be stated by a customer. So the what is left only, it is only left to reduce the variation in the process. So whenever you talk about Six Sigma or Google about Six Sigma, they will always say it is about reducing the variation in the process. So what you will achieve by reducing the variation in the process, basically you have lesser denominator. If you have a lesser denominator, your capability goes up. That is what indirectly said as an Six Sigma. So it is improving the capability of the process. Now once you do that, suppose now you have 2 processes. One is having an average 14, and my USL and LSL are 16 and 10. And there is another process who has an average of 15, while my USL and LSL were 10. Now if you calculate CP, it is same. The number comes out to be 0.45 only. But what is important, these processes are not same, because this process probably is at the center, but this process is at off center. So if it is off center, it is likely to give me a defect in the process on this side. But when I am calculating CP, this doesn't come into a picture, because anywhere in the formula I am not considering average. So the concept came in of an CPK. So what does the CPK talk about? The CPK talks about what is the minimum between CPU and CPL. Means in short, I am calculating capability on both sides. What is the capability on my upper side and what is the capability on my lower side? So if I look at the formula of CPU, it is USL minus 15, USL minus average divided by 3 into standard deviation. Earlier it was 6 when I was talking about the total sides. Now when I am talking only about one side, that is why I am making it 3. So if I look at that, my capability is only 0.22. at Mulund. Now, if suppose I look at the lower side, so there is a lot of margin and I am far away from the specification, so probably my capability is good. But when I am declaring the actual capability of the process, I always declare minimum, because there is high likely chance that I get a defect on this side, because there is my process is off-centered and likely to go outside on the upper side. That is why it is declared as minimum of CPU and CPL. So we calculate on both sides, but wherever it is lower, we declare that as an capability of the process. Now, if you look at those formulas, CP is like this, and CPU is when you are USL, only summarize the formulas. So USL minus average divided by 3. Now here, when we are calculating CP, we are not considering average, but when we are calculating CPK, we are considering the average. If you multiply it by 3, you get a sigma level. Now, if you look at, in short, what is sigma level is, when you just look at a formula of CPK, so it is USL minus average divided by 3 into standard deviation, and you are again multiplying it by 3. So if you knock off that 3, it is simply USL minus average divided by standard deviations. So in short, how many standard deviations you can accommodate on one side, that is what you want to see. I will explain you in next slide. So let us understand, when we calculate what is CP, or rather I will explain you that only. Okay. So basically, how many standard deviations you are able to accommodate on one side of the process, which is called as an sigma level of the process. And why this particular methodology is called as Six Sigma methodology? Because the strive is to accommodate 6 standard deviation on one side. So which is very difficult. For that, you have to have a very less variation in the process, and your bar has to go up, means look like an taller distribution, then only it can be possible. Now let us look at when you can call the process as a capable process. Now if suppose your CPK is less than 1, then we call that process as an incapable process. If it is between 1 to 1.33, it is marginally capable, and if it is more than 1.33, we call it as an capable process. Now, if you multiply it by 3 in terms of a Six Sigma or sigma level, what we can say, if any process having less than 3 sigma is incapable process. If it is 3 to 4, it is marginally good. But if the sigma level of the process is more than 4, let us not take a project on that, because this process is already capable. Now, why it is important to calculate CP and CPK both? Because if the CP and CPK both are equal, then we can understand that my process is perfectly centered. And if my CP is not matching with the CPK, my CPK will not be more than CP anytime. But maximum what can happen, my CP will be equal to CPK. And if they are equal, then my process is perfectly centered. If they are not equal, then my process is off-centered. Then probably in an analyze phase, you may have to go and first attempt what you have to do to make your process centered, and then reduce the variation in the process, becomes then your analyze phase. That is why it is very important to understand what is CP and what is CPK is. So if you look at that, CPK concept, if it is 1, the process looks like big. It is less than 1, it may be off-centered, slightly on the lower side or slightly on the upper side. A good process should have a distribution like this, where USL and LSL are far off from my average, and the standard deviation is so low, and everything is accommodated in between, and I have a margins on both sides. That is what is an capable process, which is stress in Six Sigma. The approach here is accommodating 6 standard deviations on this side and also 6 standard deviations on this side. So if we talk about a normal process anytime, what is a normal process means? Normal process is a bell-shaped curve, and most of my points, my 99.97% of the points lie between plus and minus 3 sigma. That is what is the definition of a normal process. So when we talk about a Six Sigma process, it is something something more than what is my normal process is. So that is what is very important. That is the concept when we have a continuous data and my process baseline process is normal. If my baseline process is not normal and I have an attribute data, which is a measurable data, like a countable data, 1, 2, 3, 4, or pass, not pass, okay, not okay, like that often data, we generally calculate the process capability based on the defects. So I have given you example of an dabbawala. So what are the dabbawala do in Mumbai? The dabbawalas deliver 2 lakh employees. They collect the dabba from home, lunch boxes from residents, give it to the office at their office, and again collect back from offices and return back to the same residence. That is what is a service industry which is very popular in Mumbai, serving lunch boxes. So 2 lakh set dabbas are delivered in Mumbai by dabbawalas. So what is the defect definition here? So right person delivered on time each time. If that is not happening, we call it as a defect. And how many defects per million opportunity? Based on that, we have a number of defects and we call that as a sigma level. So if suppose the same concept of a defects, so if suppose I want to give an example of dabbawalas, then probably they deliver 10 lakh dabbas in 5 days, because 2 lakh dabbas every day. So when they deliver 10 lakh dabbas in a week, they have only 3.4 defects because their process is declared as a Six Sigma process. So if the defects are something like 9 lakh 33,000, then it is at 0 sigma level. So as you can see, as the defects go down, the sigma level goes up, and at I said 4 and above is also called as a good process. If you look at that, you have 6,210 defects in million opportunities and your yield is 99.4. But the strive of Six Sigma is not achieving 99.4% of the yield. The strive is 99.999% yield, which is being achieved by dabbawalas, and they are being recognized by so many external or foreign agencies also for their good performance. So why? If you look at the background of dabbawalas, they are only 5th to 7th standard pass. And they speak only a local language, which is Marathi. Even then, they are able to deliver a process at very high level. So what is the secret of their success is the process. So design of the process. So when we are talking about a Six Sigma, our emphasis is improving the process. So basically a design of a process. So you have to have a perfect process so that even a fool will not commit a mistake. That is what we mean as an Six Sigma methodology. So this is an example. Generally, when we say people are not educated, they are not able to communicate, then there are the probability they will commit more mistakes. So the Mumbai ka Dabbawala is an unique example where there is a perfection with the process. So what is the secret of their success is a process. They have designed a ultimate process so that even the layman or the fifth or 7th standard person will not do any mistake. That is what is important. So ultimately, what is our objective is to design a process. So coming back to what is the capability that I was trying to give you an example. So how many standard deviations we are able to accommodate on one side of a process, that is what is called as a sigma level. So now look, if you look at the upper distribution, it is a typical normal process from my X upper specification to lower specification. There are 3 standard deviations which are accommodated, and my 99.97% of the points are between +3 sigma to -3 sigma, and what is outside is generally called as an 0.05% or etc. But the strive of Six Sigma is to accommodate 6 standard deviations on one side, so that there is very less probability of the defect. As you can understand from an earlier example of Dabbawalas also, there are only 3.4 defects in million opportunities. That is how the methodology is called as an Six Sigma methodology. So this is what is we are trying to reduce variation and eliminate defects. So if you have a sigma level process sigma level at 2, the process would like to be like this. As you reduce your defects, the process becomes thinner and taller. That is what is mean. So whole approach is to make it without variation and make it tall like that. So in a simple approach, you have a big car and you are trying to put that in a garage. Probably you will not be able to do so. So you will have to put it outside the garage. So if it is now the car is slightly less, it may happen that you will try to park a car with some risk, and you may be able to do it every time, may not be able to do it every time. But the approach is, if you have a very small and compact car within your garage, the ultimate objective is to park the car reliably and without damage. That is what is without variation. So if you your process is Six Sigma, it has a wide wide range available or wide gap available on both sides, so that you will not produce any defect. That is what is an objective of an Sigma methodology. So here we end with an measure phase. So what we looked at measure phase, what is the best way to measure? Is my measurement system within limit? And what is the baseline capability of my process? Now with that approach, we earlier look at an example of y is equal to x1, x2, x3, x4, xn. Now we have freezed y. Till now we were talking only about y. So what is my y? Now is that measurement system capable of y? So is my measurement system of measuring y capable or not? And how I am what is the process capability of y today? Now with that background, we now slightly move towards XS. So what we are try to understand in session 3 is basic statistical tools or basic seven quality tools, which means now what are my XS and what XS are making impact. And now I have to screen, use statistical tools or simple tools to screen those excess from a potential excess to a vital excess. That is what is my objective of an analyze phase. So what factors can make a difference? What is the root cause of the problem? Or how can I predict the output? That is what is the emphasis of an analyze phase. So I identify variation sources, screen potential causes. Means funnel जो हमने पहले देखा, we looked at a funnel and we are now using tools to find out what is the relationship. So for that we'll be looking at, there are various tools. We call it as a basic 7 quality tools, new 7 quality tools, then YY analysis, correlation regression analysis. So there are various tools. So I will be explaining you few. I will explain you basic 7 quality tools, then 1 or 2 from a new 7 quality tools, which are generally used for any process improvement, etc. So let us understand what are the basic 7 quality tools. Again, basic 7 quality tools are not rocket science. They are easy to understand. But unless you use one of the tool, you cannot proceed in your project. That is what is most important. So they support different situation by specific tools. Now we'll look at that. What are those tools are? So those tools are process mapping or charting, check sheet, stratification, Pareto analysis, histogram, brainstorming, control charts. There are various charts which are used. The important among them for you is a scatter plot. Because we will be using that scatter plot ahead also in correlation analysis, and which is important for you to understand how correlation analysis is being used in an industry, so that when you join any industry, you will be having that background to analyze any problem for a root cause. Now, if you look at all the 7 QC tools, this is a statement by Professor Keiro Ishikawa, who is a Japanese. 95% of your problems get solved by these tools. So if you are taking up any yellow belt or green belt project, generally these tools are sufficient, and these are basic tools to solve the problems. If at all you want to go for an advanced tool, unless you use one of these tools, you cannot go for an advanced tool. That is what is the beauty of these 7 basic tools. So we'll look them one by one. So process mapping or flow chart, that we have already covered when we were talking about what is as-is process. So it is a repetition. So I am skipping this process mapping, that because we have already done that. We had an example of a tea making process, and from that tea making process, how we can identify the problems at each step, or what are the inputs at each step, etc., etc. So that is what is about a process mapping. The second tool is called a check sheet or a data collection plan. It is also simple. So whenever you go for any traveling, generally what you do, you have a check sheet, and while going out, have you low geyser off kiya ki nahi, gas ban kiya ki nahi, like that you have a check sheet. So here is also an example. He is having his bath. So while taking his bath, he is using a check sheet whether I have cleaned my ears, neck, feet, etc. This is what is a generally convenient format of a check sheet. But here we are using that as a data collection check sheet. So let us look at an example how it can be used for a data collection. So this is a simple example of a garment industry. So there are various defects which are produced in a garment industry. The defects can be flaw, tear, or mark. And as a part of a data collection check sheet, what is being done, there is a drawing of an shirt or something like that, which is drawn, and where there is a damage or a reject, the reject is drawn on the shirt with a specific mark of an cause of an damage. So if you look at that, you just look at that, there are defects due to mark, and if you go into detail, why the mark is appearing on the sleeves, that is what is you can understand from this chart. So this is again a quantitative tool. There are some tools which are qualitative and some tools which are quantitative. What is difference between a qualitative tool? Qualitative tools only gives you the ideas or causes, while there are some tools, they give you quantity. Means here if you look at the data, somebody can quantify that how many damages or how many rejects due to mark on the sleeve. Now if you look at this, if my shirt or a shirt is getting a mark on the sleeve, when I go back to the process, when I map the process, my focus is I'm knowing at the back of my mind that I have a mark on my sleeve, and I look at the process in that angle. That is what is the importance of a check sheet. Now, what is the beauty of again these 7 QC tools? It is not like that you will only use one tool and get rid of that. So if you get a problem, you may have to use 2-3 tools in a different sequence. Now in this, what has happened, you had a data collection check sheet, and you come to know that there is a mark coming up on the sleeve. Then you go and map a process, which is the first tool, and understand why I am getting a mark on the sleeve. That is what is the next step of an process mapping. So similarly, there is another example where there are defects on the door of the car. So if you look at this, there is a bubble which is appearing at one of the place, or you can see bubble appearing at 2 places. So if I want to get rid of this bubble problem, I go back to again a process and look at the process why my bubble is appearing at this particular point. This is what is an importance of an data collection check sheet. This basically this concept was introduced to the world by a tire making industry. So they used to map where on the defect means where on the tire the defect is has come, and looking at the defect or damage on the tire, they used to go back and look at the mold. That is how it the first use was started, and then it was replicated to many other industries, garment industry, paint industry, even in the polyester industry, to inspect the bobbins where my bobbin is getting damaged. So these are the basic concepts. So you can translate, you have to select now among these 7 tools which concept is useful for my project and my industry, and use that. That is very important. So the areas of application can be number of defects, location of the defect, machine-wise breakdown, causes of defects, etc., etc. The second tool is called an stratification. So what does the stratification tells us? The method of grouping data with the common points. That is what is called as a stratification. So basically it is slicing a data. So this we always do. मतलब subconscious mind में we always do this. कौन था, who was there, what happened, when it happened, where it happened. So but you do it in a structured manner. So for example, who means you can ask which department, which individual, which customer type. What means what type of a complaint, defect category, reasons for incoming calls, etc. So if you look at the total analytics nowadays, what is very popular in the industry or in the institutes, the whole of the analytics is based on the tool called stratification. So you must have come across the advertisements set by management institutes, fancy advertisements that we have an analytics course. So if you look at that analytics course, basically the tool used, which is stratification, and based on this stratification, you means there is a computer support which has been given using this tool. You write a language, and based on that language, your data is continuously analyzed for this stratification. That is what is called as a business rule. And based on that business rule, you come out with every point that what has happened, who has done it, or when it has happened, or where it has happened, like that. So when means which month, quarter, day of the week, time of the day, or where, any region, city, etc., etc. So basically the tool is, and there is the brainstorming is the limit, means you can slice your data in many ways. So you can imagine and slice the data. That is what is an today's analytics is. And if I want to give an example, simple example, how it helps any of the process improvement or project. So let us assume these are my pizza late deliveries over the period. So I had a bar chart with late deliveries, which is 5 or more, 5 to 7, 8 to 10, 11 to 13, etc., etc. So what is this? I am talking about the late deliveries of pizza in last month, and it is for an entire day. Now, if suppose I want to slice the data using a stratification, so I have sliced the data. So what I have done, basically, I have sliced the data using time. So how many deliveries between 12 to 4 p.m. So my Domino's pizza shop starts at 12 o'clock in the morning. So how many late deliveries from 12 to 4, then 4 to 8, and how many late deliveries beyond 8 to midnight. Now, if you slice the data in the manner, obviously you come to know that there are more deliveries which are happening from 8 to midnight. So again, you become focused with this tool and map the process only what is, or try to understand the potential causes why it is happening only after 8 to midnight. Probably it may, you may come out with various reasons. We reduce the manpower, we reduce or we run less number of ovens, or there are a lot of people come after 8 o'clock and we have less number of resources to serve them, etc., etc. But what is important in this, that you are arrived at that by slicing the data, which is called as a stratification. So this is one of the tool which is called as a stratification. So the next tool is Pareto diagram. The Pareto diagram is a basic principle, economic principle, uh, uh, stated by Wilfred Pareto. The economic principle was that 80% of the wealth is with 20% of the people. He died in 1923, but his principle still holds good or still holds true even today. So after almost 100 years also, his economic principle is still valid. So based on this economic principle, Joseph Juran, who converted this economic principle to a management principle called 80% of the effects are due to 20% of the causes. So it is also called as an 80-20 rule, you must have heard. So it is nothing but an Pareto diagram or Pareto analysis. So it is in short called as an 80-20 rule. So how does it look like? So the graph is multiple graph with two scales. So one scale is on left side and left side and one on the right side. And you have a bar graph using a left scale and cumulative percentage using a right scale. So how does it work? So from right hand side, if you draw a line like this, so what does it indicate? These four types of defects contribute to 80% of the defects. That is what is the meaning of this. And what is the idea here again? Identify travel few from travel many. Identify vital few from travel many. So again, there are more potential causes. You screen them and identify a vital cause. So it is identify a vital cause out of travel many. That is what is the idea again here. So just look at how a Pareto diagram is configured or how a Pareto diagram is drawn. You can try it out for your project. It is very useful, or as a concept also it is very useful to go forward to identify critical ones and devote your resources on the critical factors only. So there is a tape unit assembly, and there are various types of defects which are generated out of tape unit assembly. The categories are A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, and there are 150 parts which are inspected for defects, and out of those 150 parts they are categorized into various categories based on the defects, number of defects. So for example, out of 150, A type of defects were 70, D type of defects were 23, and F type of defects were 7. So this is a quantity number, and if you talk how much is the percentage, so 70 out of 150 is 47%. That is what is an individual percentage that has come up. Now when you have to draw a Pareto, the first thing what you have to do is to put them in a descending order. So the order has changed here now. A, B, C, D has changed. Now it has A, D, G, B, something like that, based on the quantity of the defects in a descending order. Now you had a percentage also here, and then the third column which comes here is called as a cumulative percentage. So what is a cumulative percentage? Is the first has an contribution of 47%. While second has gotten contribution of 62%. That is 47 plus 15 is 62. Then 62 plus 10 is 72, and 72 plus 8 is 80. Now what is important to understand? You have a total defects which are contributing to 100%, but 80% of that are contributed by these four. That is what is you come to know from a table also, but it is called as a Pareto chart. And this is how the Pareto chart looks like. It is you had a bar graph for percentage defects. You can draw a quantity also here, doesn't make a difference. But what is important that your line is often cumulative percentage, that it goes on increasing 47, 62, 72, 80, and it maximum it is 100, because it cannot be more than 100. You are splitting cumulative percentage as 100%. Now if you draw a line from 80 to down, it is very interesting to understand that 4 defects are causing your 80% of the problem. That is what his earlier statement was. 80% of the effects are due to 20% of the causes. That is the exact percentage. If you look like it, it is 50%. If I have more number of reasons here, then probably it will come to only 20% of the reasons. So what is important and understanding from an again Pareto is that what if suppose where I have to devote my resources. Now if you look at this example, my type of defect A is contributing to a 47%. So if I am able to get rid of defect A, my process improvement is going to be jumped by 47%. So that is what is most important that you can understand from the exercise. This is again a quantitative tool and can be used in causes of defects, reasons of delay, etc., etc. So reasons of stoppages, any complaint, customer complaint, airlines complaint, baggage complaints, what are the reasons for those baggage complaints, etc., can be used, can be solved or prioritized using Pareto analysis. The next tool is called as a brainstorming or cause and effect diagram. It is a qualitative tool. So basically, when we say brainstorming, we try to generate the ideas, and that is what is generating ideas, even generating the potential causes for the problem. Now, out of if you are mapping a process, the team sits for a brainstorming and what can go wrong at first step, second step, etc., and get those all causes, which is called as a brainstorming. So, in brainstorming, we generally collect the potential causes. We don't criticize the idea or we don't reject the idea here. We don't say aisa nahi hota hai, yeah, this is not possible, etc., etc. We don't comment. But the team, whoever sits, can imagine freely and give his ideas that why this problem can happen. It can be also in a focused way, like we saw in a earlier examples of stratification, that a mark at particular level on the shirt or bubble at particular level, a particular place on a door, or even late deliveries after 8 o'clock. So we can have a focused brainstorming on those problems also. So what can happen? You can combine or collect all the people in the Pizza Hut and give them a problem that it has observed from data that we have late deliveries only after 8 o'clock. So probably you can involve the people, all those who are working after 8 o'clock. So if you involve them, everybody among them will contribute something that why it happens late. So they will give you various reasons of delay, etc., etc. So idea of brainstorming is to collect all those reasons, and then you can walk through a process and collect the data. Yes, my this delivery was delayed due to this reason, my this delivery is delayed due to this reason, and based on that you can have a Pareto chart for what are the various delays, and you can have a critical delay or a critical reason for delay and work on that. That is what is the idea. So in brainstorming, it is only a free imagining freely to generate ideas. That is what is the purpose. But what is important here is also that if you involve the people in brainstorming, or the shop floor people in brainstorming, or concerned people in brainstorming, it is very easy for you to implement the solution of the problem at shop floor. Because if you see, analyzing the problem in a book or on a computer many times is easy. You come out with a solution, but people at the shop floor doesn't accept that change. So the brainstorming is also a soft tool where you start building the consensus on the solution when you involve all the people in brainstorming. So what happens if you involve the shop floor people on the in the brainstorming, probably when you come out with a solution, they feel that I am also part of this solution, and they don't resist while implementing the solution. That is what is one of the strong point of the brainstorming, and I have experienced that. Because what happens ultimately, it is a teamwork, and if they are also given a credit that yes, you have given or we have found out this idea to implement this, then they become a part of a solution, and then implementation will become very easy. Very important, very important tip for you to be successful in the industry, that you involve right people in brainstorming, and involve them to create a solution also. So there are various methods by which a brainstorming can be conducted. Generally, it is round robin method. Means round robin method kaise hote hai? There are 15 people sitting, and everybody speaks out only one idea, and like that everything goes down. It is not like that the boss will speak out the idea and rest of the people will listen only. It is not like that. So everybody, he is also, when even the manager or the head of the department is sitting in a brainstorming, he is only participating as an individual and not as a position. So he will also speak one idea, and it goes on, and you generate several ideas. That is what is the idea. There is I saw an idea called, which is a wildest idea brainstorming or reverse thinking brainstorming. So हर positive सोचो, negative सोचो, उल्टा क्या हो सकता है सोचो. That is what is thinking and generating the idea. There is also common methodology which is called as a 6-3-5 brainstorming. Generally, what happens for a brainstorming, your team has to be homogeneous. If you feel that the team is not homogeneous, then the 6-3-5 or team is small, then this idea of 6 person writing 3 ideas on a paper and in a 5 minutes and pass on that paper to a next person. So when it comes to a next person, he reads that and write a different idea on the paper. That is what is how 3-6-5 goes up. But generally, if you have an homogeneous group, a round robin method is followed. So sometimes, suppose there is a cross-functional problem and there are people from various zones are coming together. So if there are various people all over the India are coming, then somebody might have an thinking that how I can speak out this, all other zonal people will laugh at me, they don't know me, etc., etc. In that case, they have to write the idea. That is how 369 is used. So give everyone chance to speak. Do not criticize idea. Record all ideas. Ideas are to be expanded. Means understand the idea, what he wants to say. You can expand the idea. That is what is built on idea is the concept. Okay. Ideas are improved upon by members. Presence of others increase creativity. That is how we have to come out as an together as a group. That is what is important. When to use brainstorming to find out solution to the specific problem, brainstorming can be used. Now, once you get that those ideas, we categorize that ideas called as an effect and cause. So how we categorize those ideas? The general guidelines are like this. If it is a transactional environment, then 6 P's. If it is a manufacturing environment, then 5M and 1P, which is person, machine, method, mother nature, material, and measurement. It is not mandatory also to categorize like this, but you have a basket, 100 ideas. Now it becomes sense to categorize them. That is why it can be categorized in different categories also, not necessarily man, method, machine, but this is what is a general guideline which is being followed. So if you look at one of the example as a poor housekeeping, then what are the machine related problems, what are man related problems, what are housekeeping material related problems, method related problems, like this. Now if you look at this cause and effect may not be relevant because you don't have that industrial experience, but conflict at workplace. So it is not man machine method like that. So what are the reasons which are boss related? What are the reasons which are self related? What are the peer group related? What are the subordinate related, etc. So every problem can be analyzed using a cause and effect diagram. It is a qualitative tool to get the idea and build a consensus for implementing the solution. The next tool is histogram. So basically the histogram is about the spread in the process. So where is the center, how much is the width, spread, and how is the overall shape. So you can have height of adults male in the city, 15-year-old boys in the town, 50 students in maths, etc. So nowadays the histogram is most popular when vaccination is going on. How many number of population in below age of 18, 18 to 45, 45 to 60, and more than 60 are these four charts where we are looking at the figures nowadays. So this is one of the example of histogram having four categories. So our intervals. So if we increase the intervals, we'll have an good histogram to give a representation of where our people are. So generally, the histogram is bell-shaped, means very symmetric on both sides. It has got an average at center and then decline at both the sides. Symmetrical shape with a peak in the middle representing a normal histogram, which is called as a normal histogram or a bell-shaped curve. So how we construct a histogram? So let us look at an example. So these are the marks scored by 12 students in a science out of 100. So if you have the score of 12, then first is what is the lowest value, what is the highest value. Then based on that lowest and highest value, you draw a maximum number of how many intervals are required, then what is the interval width, and then you draw a frequency. So that is how histogram is done. So in a particular example, my highest was 92, my smallest was 25, so my overall range is 67. Now I have to divide this 67 into number of intervals. So for dividing that into a number of intervals, there are general three methods which are being used. This is on a mathematical formula, while this is general thumb rules. So if my number of observations are up to 50, my number of intervals would be 5 to 7. So in this case, my number of observations are 12. So my number of interval will be 5 to 7. Otherwise, you can also use a mathematical formula by method 2 or method 3. So once we finalize the interval, basically it is range divided by how many intervals. So the range is 67 divided by 7 intervals. So basically my each interval will be of 100. That is what I understand. And I map those intervals on my X scale. And and also draw a frequency on my Y scale. That is what is a representation of an histogram. So I have these intervals, and I had a frequency out of my 12 readings is like this. And if I draw it like this now, so this is how my histogram looks like. Now ideally, my mean and median should match. If my distribution is normal and perfectly centered, then my mean and median will match. Now, what is very important to understand, whenever we take a project, we generally talk about average or mean. So you can consider average and mean only if your data is normal. So if your data is normal, mean and median are same. But if the data is not normal, it is very important that you must be considering median of your project for an improvement. So why median? Because if you take a mean, the mean is influenced by each and every value in the data set. So if I get few outliers on the higher side or few only on the higher side, my average will be on the higher side. If I get few outliers only on the lower side, my average will be on the lower side. but this will not happen with the medium. So now you are going for you will be going for a job placements. So typically the companies or the HR managers who comes to your organization or institute, they generally call about a median salary in that grade. So if they are saying that we'll observe you as an engineer, so what is a median salary in that grade? So typically HR people talk about a median salary because that is an best representation of the center and not the mean. If your data is normal, then mean will be median. Then it doesn't make a difference whether you consider mean or median. But whenever generally we take up any project, we always talk about the median, mean, or average. But that is not a right thing. It may be an eye opener for you, but whenever you are looking for a mean of any process or mean yield or mean something, just look at the what is median also. If mean and median are matching, then your data is normal. And if it is not normal, then it is better to consider a median of your the process for any improvement. So if the data is not normal, probably it looks like this. So there is a shift. So you can make out from this distribution what can be the problem in your process and go back in analyze phase to look at that. Now, how typically this can happen? So this can happen only when you are measuring output. Suppose I am measuring a total output, and I have a packing automatic packing process and manual packing process. So if that output is coming together, then I will probably have this type of a distribution. My two processes are working simultaneously in one process. That is what is the meaning of this. Then this is a typical form of an truncated data, and this is a typical form of an having outliers on the process on a higher side, etc., etc. So once you have an histogram, you can interpret about the process and go back to a process and analyze phase to analyze what can be the problem. That is what is an objective of an histogram. So coming to a last tool, which is called graphs, charts, run charts, etc. So I will not explain much about these because most of you are very familiar with graphs. So this is a typical type of a line graph. We often look this type of a graph when we are looking at a cricket match, one day or 20 overs match. So how other was performing and this team is performing. So this is typically a pillar graph or a bar graph, or like this is what is a column pillar or bar graph, or this is a particular graph which is a belt graph where this is a bar graph only, but that bar graph or a pillar graph is split into categories so that you come to know what has increased and what has not increased, like that over the period. So there are various types of program which are done by a quality QCFI, that is Quality Circle Forum India. And they want to analyze whether the programs are done for school, offices, appreciation programs, or in-house programs. So as you see, the graph has increased. You can very well say that in-house program has gone up, while for program for offices and school has practically reduced, like that. So this is a typical pie chart. I hope you are aware about it. You are using an Excel and you can draw a pie chart like this. So this is an example of a compound graph. We looked at this example typically in when we were also talking about the Pareto chart. This is a different kind of a chart which is called as a radar chart. This chart is on a 360 degree. So basically what you can do in this, you can have a before and after data in this. So this is a typical example. There are 8 topics, and on 8 topics the training was conducted, and the results of training means before the knowledge gained by training is recorded in scores how much was the score before the training and how much was the score after the training. So if you typically look at that, how much was the before the training is plotted on this, and then after the training is again plotted on this. So with that you come to know that on the if you look at this, there is not much change in cause and effect diagram topic. But if you look at this control charts, the knowledge has gained, matlab, it has gained much in this topic, but here it has not gained much. That is what you can understand using a radar chart. So typically, the important chart for you is a scatter diagram. So what is the relationship between X and Y? So typically X and Y, how they are behaving. So it is called as an correlation. This is also visual. This is a visual type of a graph. If you get any clue that there is a relationship, we take it forward and try to find out what is a correlation coefficient among the two parameters, which is X and Y. That we'll consider next time. But it is very important for you to look at this. It is again, I said, this is one of the tool you have used to go for an advanced tool, which is called as an correlation analysis. So we'll look at that correlation analysis in detail next time. But this is a tool which is called as a scattered time at a basic level. So what can be analyzed? Cutting speed or tool life, moisture content, thread elongation, breakdown, equipment age, temperature and lipstick hardness, striking pressure and electrical current, etc., etc. So I think we'll stop here. Next time we'll go with few more tools. Again, I said, we have finished with the basic QC tools, basic quality tools. Now there are new quality tools which are called also as a management tools. So we'll refer one of them, which is the tree diagram, and then YY analysis, etc., etc. And we'll also look at the lean tools also. And then I will probably, for the class after that, probably the 5th class, I will show you how the case study is being done. So we'll stop here. Any questions so far on this? Hello?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Sir, my question is, sir, what does the height of Six Sigma chart represent? So the width represents the lesser variation and the defect. What does the height represent?
Height doesn't represent anything. We want to have maximum height so that we reduce the variation. Height depends on how many observations you have. If you have more frequency, then your height will be more. If you have lesser number of observations, then your height will be less. The only is what is the spread is. Our concern is only spread.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
There is also a measure, pickedness, which is being measured in the statistics. What is the pickedness in this, or kurtosis? So you go and Google, there are two words I said, pickedness and kurtosis. You will get the definition, but it doesn't make much difference for us on the capability as long as we are only interested in what is spread is. Okay, but you can go definitely and look at pickedness and kurtosis.
Yes, sir. Sure, sir.
Anything else?
Anybody have any more questions or queries?
Yes.
Anybody have any more questions? Sir, I think no one have any more questions or a doubt. So we can conclude the session.
Yes, yes. Probably next Saturday, mostly we will not have a session. We will skip next Saturday and have a session on next Saturday. Mostly. I will talk to Nikhil. Okay. But just I am informing you in advance.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much, sir,
Okay, thank
for
you.
giving your precious time.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.